Welcome to VoteProPot-Cast, the award-winning cannabis news podcast brought to you by VoteProPot.com. Here are your hosts, Phil Adams, Jay Britton, and Andrew McCreadies.
What is the top cannabis strain of the year? We've got that for you.
Peanut butter breath.
Peanut butter breath is a very good one, apparently. That's what I hear. The Senate does something mighty important this week, and we're going to tell you what they did and what it's all about.
The Senate did something?
The Senate did something, which in itself is a monumental achievement, but they did something with regard to cannabis. Should we start with that?
Yeah, what did they do?
Tell us what they did.
The Senate, you may recall, the House a couple of weeks ago first passed the MORE Act, the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act. They followed that up a week later with the Marijuana Research Expansion Act, I think it was called. Mm-hmm. And we were all wondering, well, what's going to happen to that in the Senate? It's going to die a lonely death like everything else does in the Senate. But no.
But no.
This past week, the Senate approved research bill. It's called the Cannabidiol and Marijuana Research Expansion Act, passed by the GOP-controlled House, or Senate, rather. And this comes, again, less than 1 week after they passed the similar bill, research bill, in the House. Now, of course, the two bills have to be reconciled in conference, and they need to vote on it before the congressional session ends on January 3rd of 2021. But it looks like that has the bipartisan support that I kind of suspected it might have, considering who was on board in the Senate. Well, it turns out one of the co-sponsors is Republican Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa. And he is very old school conservative. And if you can get this past him, you know,
yeah, that's a trip.
That's pretty good. He said, researching marijuana is widely supported by my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, and it's a smart step forward in addressing this current Schedule I drug. So, whereas there is a great bit of difference between the two parties when it comes to legalization, not so
much research
when it comes to research. So, kudos to the Senate and senators on both sides of the aisle for making this happen. And I think now the DEA will almost certainly have to make good on their own rule and start expanding licenses for cultivators for research. Right. Yeah. Because they were supposed to start doing that in 2016, and still the only place you can get marijuana for research that is federally sanctioned is University of Mississippi.
Well, I'll ask you the same question I asked after the MORE Act passed, both you guys. Why weed in Congress? It was the House and now the Senate. I mean, that's almost all they voted on in the last.
It's right.
You know, it's weird. It's weird.
I don't know.
It's just really strange. Or is it just that's all we're hearing about? I don't know.
Well, we're hearing about it because this is what we look for. You know, this is our bailiwick here. So that's probably part of it. But I think you have to just chalk it up to it. The time has come.
Yeah. Well, this is a major bill. I mean, if you think about it, this is huge for the cannabis industry and for medical cannabis and just for legalization as a whole. Passing a bill after waiting 50 freaking years to allow for research. Wow. That's a big deal.
Well, it's an important bill. It will it's going to expand the number of cultivators and just make it legal for researchers to use and procure marijuana at state legal dispensaries for research. And so if a researcher does that, the feds can't touch it now, Yeah,
we talked about last week how at least one dispensary is doing that, and they're teaming up with medical research hospital or universities. And basically, they're using the dispensaries to screen applicants for the test. So going through, and when you go in, if you want to sign up, you say, yeah, I'm interested in a survey. And the survey asks you questions like, why are you using medical cannabis? Arthritis, can't sleep.
Right.
Yeah. And then the universities use that to narrow down participants in the research, which is very cool.
They can also help them. I think they ask people what strains they're using.
Yeah, that's right. They probably track that too.
When it comes to research, that's what we need to know.
I think you're right. I think it's going to be all about strains and
terpenes, and
combinations of terpenes and combinations of compounds and stuff like that.
Compound profiles and what ratios are they in there? Because CBD is THC is THC, no matter what it is, what strain it's in. And other terpenes are it could be a marijuana or many other plants. A lot of terpenes,
right? So
it's those ratios that they come together, and what makes one a Charlotte's Web and what makes one a peanut butter spread.
Yeah, right. And one of the things that's become big, and I see it in Virginia because we've been so slow to come along with legalization, but the THCA and CBD are really big in Virginia. Like you can go into the vape shops. I have a friend that owns a vape shop, a couple. They own a vape shop. And I was in there talking to them last week about the podcast and stuff, and they were asking me questions. But he told me that their THCA is selling like crazy.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, in what form? Like a tincture?
Yeah, yeah. It's like an oil tincture. And, it's basically the THC without no, it's THC with the acid molecule attached to it. With the acid molecule, without it removed.
So it's not decarbed.
Before it's decarboxylated, right?
But is there a way to decarboxylate whatever they're selling?
I don't know. I imagine you could if you did it right, if you heated it up or so. I don't know, because it's suspended. I don't know. I mean, I'd have to ask somebody who knows a lot more about that than us. But anyway, that's a big deal, Phil. That's a big deal.
Well, which also leads me to the second big deal of this today. Somebody we know and love went to a Virginia dispensary.
That's
How
right.
the hell about that? Yeah. We never thought we'd see that, did we? I mean, when we started this podcast, it was like, you guys in Maryland, you got to go on. I go, forget Virginia. It's never going to happen. Well, it did happen, and tell us what happened.
Well, we finally did get a dispensary close to me open that has THC product, and I got online the day they opened, which was 3 weeks ago. And you had to make an appointment to go in the first time. You have to meet with like a counselor or whatever they call it. Right. So but it took 3 weeks to get an appointment, a 15-minute appointment. So it must be pretty popular. Wow. So I went in there and it was great. I mean, they had basically all they have right now is tinctures and oils. They have vape pens, cartridges rather, and that kind of thing.
No flour?
No flour. It's going to be a while before we get flour. They do have some I call them edibles. It's really gummies. Again, Virginia is set up so that the pharmaceutical board runs this. So the only products at the moment they're allowed to carry are things that you could get through a pharmacy and be administered the way drugs would be. In other words, something you eat or swallow like a pill or an oil that you can take or salve or something like that. No burning of flour yet.
So it's they take the medical aspect of that seriously. Yeah, it's very much medical cannabis.
So they don't call them gummies, they call them something else, but essentially they're gummies. He told me they would have those very soon, like within a couple of weeks. They just had the production was behind a little bit or something. So anyway, exciting for Virginia.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Send us your thoughts at VoteProPot.com/contact or send us an email at podcast@VoteProPot.com and please give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. If you'd like to be part of the show, call our message line at 240-257-2441.
Oh, you know what I saw on the internet the other day? Jay's sister posted a really lovely picture of her and Jay when they were kids sitting on Santa's lap. No, did you see that on the internet?
I didn't see that.
How old are you, like 5? And Jill's
probably,
like 3?
Probably. Yeah. You notice she's the one on Santa's lap. I'm standing
the safe distance away. What I wanted to comment on was the Santa. This guy looks pretty creepy. He really did. I mean, if I walked up, I wouldn't put my kid on that guy's lap. Look at that guy, man. He's pervious.
Sit on my lap, little girl.
Exactly. That's exactly how we probably sounded.
What can Santa bring you for Christmas this year?
That's exactly what he said to me. So, guys, Leafly has announced their top cannabis strain of the year. And it's a strain I've never heard of. Yeah, drum roll, please. Leafly revealed its cannabis strain of the year for 2020 last week, bestowing the honor on a popular variety of marijuana called Runtz, R-U-N-T-Z.
Familiar with the candy Runts. But
The announcement marks Leafly's third annual selection of the best cannabis strain by American consumers.
How do they qualify it as the best? What criteria do they use?
I guess you would ask me that.
Just what's the most popular?
So how does Leafly decide which cultivar will take the honors of the best cannabis strain of the year? Down says that the process involves a quantitative and qualitative mashup of information from a host of cannabis journalists who report on cannabis strains from both a national and regional perspective. So I guess they basically survey journalists. You send out a form, probably ask them to rate them. So this strain is a hybrid of two strains, one of which won last year. So that kind of makes sense.
So it's got a pedigree, you might say.
Congratulations to Runtz.
Runts. I've never heard of it.
Although
what can we what do we know about the strain Runts? Is it what kind of profile?
It's commonly believed to be an offspring of two other popular varieties, like I said, one called Z Kittles and one called Gelato. Gelato was honored last year, as I understand it, as the strain of the year. So, I can't find where the strain originated. I wonder if it's like the Emerald Triangle or where it comes from. It says that it has a really satisfying taste and a potent THC level of 17.5 and up.
Okay.
It's a strong strain on its own right. That's not enough to garner strain of the year status, however. A heavy dose of marketing is also required. And featuring cannabis in the music and lifestyle of hip-hop is a proven strategy to ring up sales, going back to the early days of acts such as Dr. Dre and Cypress Hill.
And let's not forget Snoop.
I think it's a lot like winning, a Tony or something. It's
Right.
A lot of PR involved.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of politicking.
Yep.
Well, that's pretty cool. Well done, Leafly. Now, Leafly, if you've never checked out Leafly online, it's got a lot of pretty interesting, not so much the politics news, but a lot of culture news and a lot of they do stuff with investment and just picking out strains. I mean, you can go online and on Leafly and pick out a strain and it'll recommend one that's a good one for you, depending on what your wants and needs are. So it's a good place to check out.
I recommend Cannabis.net. They have a great strains page. You can go and then it has a social media kind of element to it, so you can go in there yourself and comment on strains that you've tried. So it's a great way to go on, and people will say, "Oh man, I used this one for my shoulder and it worked great," or "This one didn't help," or "This one put me to sleep and gave me couch lock." And so Cannabis.net and our friend Kurt Dalton over there, man, that's a great website for looking up strains.
Absolutely.
The thing about Leafly is they've been opportunistic since the coronavirus and everyone's ordering online. They're all ordering through Leafly, which is,
Right.
all the dispensaries are telling you, just go to Leafly,
That's right. And I think their traffic has boomed as a result.
Boomed.
Oh, I'm sure.
And also they've now they've got to be able to be tracking all these sales and tell you what the number one selling strains are.
Yeah,
and I'm sure that goes into their decision. What are the ones that
say that? But I don't know.
Well, I don't know. Well, actually, that should be. I would like to know that.
Me too.
All on its own. Every week they should list the most popular selling strains.
A bestsellers list.
That's a great idea. Somebody must be doing that. We should look into that. We should ask Kurt. If he does that or anyone's doing that, because obviously the dispensaries track what they sell. I mean, all retail establishments track what they sell. So it would be interesting to see what are the popular strains from a strictly revenue sales standpoint.
And
right, and I bet you there's all kinds of metrics behind it. You know, who's buying what,
right.
and
Well,
why.
I would like to know what flower strain are popular, are selling the most. What cart strains are selling the most.
Yeah.
And
well, the thing is,
maybe what edibles are popular.
Break it down by
what edibles.
Right.
Yeah. Well, the
by
thing
category.
is, that's all in a database because obviously you have to have a card to buy the stuff, and then when it's rung up on your account.
Right.
So they know
that
who's
information's
buying
all
what,
over the place.
Yeah, it's everywhere. You know that.
But it does my heart good to know that this is operating like any other business.
Yeah.
You know.
Right.
and the more the government can take its freaking hands off it, the more it'll operate like a regular business.
Right.
And people will get what they want, you know, and pay for what they want. So that's good stuff, man. I like that. I think doing a ranking like that is a service for folks, and I'm glad that they're doing it. I'm glad that
not for the consumer, but for the retailers as well, and people in the industry.
Sure.
That'd be big.
Sure.
Time.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
But then we might risk the thing of all of a sudden one day, years down the road, only like 4 strains will be available. Will be 80% of the sales are going to be 4 strains.
Well, I mean, you could say that, but you know, that would be like saying that eventually there's only going to be like Budweiser, Miller, and Coors available. Well, there's a billion beers you can buy now.
Yeah, and there didn't used to be.
Right.
I mean, it used to be, you know, 4 beers,
Yeah.
you know, there was 4 beer brands. And now with the craft thing, you're going to see the same thing in cannabis. I mean, you're going to have
I think you'll see the same thing in cannabis as you do in beer and wine.
You see it everywhere now, the way it's marketed.
So,
well, speaking of business, did you guys hear about this merger between Tilray and Aphria?
I did not.
It's a big deal. And the Tilray stock soared this week. Aphria stockholders.
Do you own Tilray?
I do a little bit, yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Aphria stockholders will own 62% of the combined company, the two, which is expected to be the largest global cannabis company now. So shares of Tilray soared Wednesday after the company announced an agreement to merge with Aphria Inc. in a deal that is expected to create the world's largest cannabis company by revenue and by a combined equity value of $3.9 billion with a B. Under the terms of the deal, Aphria stockholders will receive 0.8381 Tilray shares for each Aphria share that they own.
Okay, so it's not quite 1-to-1, but close. Right,
and the Tilray, just hold on to your Tilray because obviously it's added value. Once the deal is completed, which is expected to occur in the second quarter of 2021, Aphria stockholders will own 62% of Tilray's outstanding shares. Based on Tuesday's stock closing prices, the deal, which is structured as a reverse acquisition of Tilray, represents 23% premium for Tilray stockholders. So that's pretty sweet.
Okay. Now, what do you suppose a reverse acquisition means?
I imagine
the smaller company buys the larger company.
So. Yeah, that's what I assume. But I'm no stock genius by any.
I don't either. I've never heard of that before. But it sounds cool.
It's the combined company is projected to have revenues of $685 million. And the merger is also expected to deliver about $100 million in Canadian dollars. That's about $78.5 million in U.S. dollars in cost synergies within 2 years of the deal's closure, including in the areas of cultivation, production, cannabis, product purchasing, and sales and marketing. So that's going to be one of the first real behemoths, in the industry. I mean, this is a huge. Well,
it is. It's a huge thing.
$4
now,
billion company. That's
if they can hold on to that, because this is coming at a time when so many the big Canadian verticals are cutting way back.
Yeah.
MedMen, one of the first things we reported on in 2020 was cutting way back on its production and growing operations. I think recently we heard that Canopy Growth, the other big vertical, is doing the same thing.
Yeah.
When companies are realizing that they may have bitten off more than they could chew, this comes along, and now we've got the synergy of these two big companies merging into one. So,
congrats to you, Tilray owners.
So this is a topic that I think bears a little bit of discussion because, and Jay, it's one that you you brought up, and it speaks to, the cannabis as kind of a civil rights issue almost. I'll let you pose the question.
Interesting. I saw this in the French Toast, and it's byline's a guy named Mike Adams. Any relation, Phil? No. But it raises a really interesting question and point, which I thought I'd run by you guys. And the question really is cannabis really legal without the freedom to grow it yourself at home?
No.
Is it really legal? No. I agree, Andrew.
Not really, no.
And what brought this article is fairly lengthy. It's got a lot of great points in it. But I think what raises it currently is New Jersey.
Right.
Because New Jersey is not allowing they passed recreational, as we know, but you're not allowed to grow it at all. And to me, it speaks to the libertarian in me. The freedom question is like, well, if it's a legal plant, I can't have some in my backyard. Andrew made this point before we went on, and I understand this, maybe setting a limit. You can grow 10 plants or whatever it is. Setting some sort of reasonable limit.
You can make beer or wine in your house.
Yes, you can, right?
Yeah,
or
but
you can grow corn. You can grow tomatoes.
5,000 cases of beer in your garage.
That's right, without some sort of permit. There are limits, and that makes sense. Totally makes sense. But to say that if you grow...
But to ban it outright.
If you grow cannabis in your yard or in your house in a legal state, you could go to jail or get fined or whatever. I think that's really precedent. So the question then is why? Why do they do that? There are a couple of reasons. And you've got two different factions here. You've got the industry itself that says, well, that's going to impede on our ability, on our revenues, because you're going to be taking business away. Don't you think that's bullshit?
Boo freaking who?
I mean, they're dealing with tons of cannabis, right? And you got some people growing 10 plants in their yard. Their argument is, well, if he's growing weed, he's not going to buy it in the dispensary from me, and it's going to hurt our business.
Why is that the government's problem?
Too fucking bad.
Right, why is that my problem?
That is
why is that my problem?
Why is that my problem? Exactly. The other faction is law enforcement. So law enforcement's argument is that allowing citizens to grow their own cannabis will lead to increasing the black market, because you're going to have folks that get together and build a warehouse and grow lots of plants.
But again, that's
illegal anyway. Right. That's illegal anyway. So that argument sucks. So that the thought that some guy, you or me or Andrew, Phil, we can go grow 10 plants in our backyard and make $1 million a year selling it, that's just stupid.
Well, also, they're not being realistic, because if you're going to grow, people don't understand. Growing marijuana is not easy. And
that's right.
Let me rephrase it. Growing good marijuana is not easy.
Right. There you go.
Right. You can make a plant grow, but it doesn't mean you're going to have a good
lot
product
involved.
Right. And there's so many ways to fail. Not only in first the selection of the strain, right? People are going to want more than one strain, obviously.
Right.
And then the growing process of it, the drying of it, the curing of it, the processing of it. I mean, if you want to make powder or oil out of it,
right?
That is so hard. I mean, it takes such a skill to do it right, that there's not going to be a lot of people out there producing a lot of high quality weed. And those that are going to be such connoisseurs that they're probably still going to be going to the dispensaries to buy.
Right. To buy, Well, here's a great example. I have a neighbor that makes beer, and I don't know him very well, but he's had a couple of block parties and gone there and drank his beer, and it sucked, I mean, but why take the right away from him to make a barrel of beer for his friends? It's the same kind of thing. If you want to grow some weed at your house for fun and maybe share a few joints or half an ounce with a buddy, it's going to be like when you make wine in your house. It sucks, but you give it to your friends for freaking Christmas or something,
Right. And as Andrew talked about in one of our early episode, there are certain things that you can't do with anything but fresh grown weed plants.
That's true.
There is
juicing.
Right.
Juicing. That whole entourage effect of the raw plant can be very beneficial.
You can't buy that in a dispensary.
You can't buy that.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, I thought it was. I'm not going to read through the article, but I think it's an interesting question to think about. And then one more thing: what will happen when this is federally legal? Okay, we get rid of Schedule 1, and the government maybe sets forth some basic regulations. I wonder if home grow will be part
addressed
of that.
on a national level.
Yeah, on a national level. You wonder. Let's hope so.
Yeah, because they have dry counties. Which means you can't sell it in that county. But that doesn't mean you can't possess it.
Exactly. And that you see that all over legal states. I mean, California, I think something like 70 or 80% of California is they don't have legal cannabis to buy, like you said. I don't know how to put it.
Weed deserts.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
like you said, you can possess it, but you can't go buy it anywhere because that particular jurisdiction or county said, no, we don't want that.
We don't want retail.
Right. We don't want retail.
Right. And there will be, like you say, a certain amount of federal regulation that has to do probably with various aspects of, import laws, wholesale distribution, advertising, labeling,
which is true with any.
That's
industry.
true with beer and wine,
every
industry. Cigarettes.
Yeah, I mean literally.
Yeah. So fine. But I think the question here is that is a question of basic civil liberties.
Yeah, that's my point.
If you shackle me in one aspect, don't tell me I'm free. Because the shackles you put on me didn't cost me anything. It's still a limitation on, and think about it in terms of a plant. This is a plant. Do they regulate ginseng like this?
Right.
Do they regulate chamomile tea like this?
Tomatoes.
I wonder is it a big problem of people growing their own tobacco?
Right.
Nobody does because it's too hard.
It's a lot cheaper to go buy it. And that'll be the case with
same
cannabis.
thing with weed. It's the thing. If you want to go get this, you just go to dispensary and there's like a million different, products and strains.
And it's relatively inexpensive. There's a lot of work going into growing an ounce of weed.
Right.
And it costs a lot of money to do it.
Right. And you just go and buy high quality weed.
Well, here's an example. Alcohol was made legal once again in the United States in 1933, right? But it wasn't until 45 years later that the law was changed to allow people to brew their own beer and wine at home. Jimmy Carter actually signed a law in 1978 legalizing home brewing. Did you know that? So from the time that
so Billy wouldn't go to jail.
From the time Prohibition ended in 33, it wasn't until the late 70s that you were allowed to brew beer in your house. So
same thing.
That is same thing.
Yeah.
So anyway,
I remember my dad made wine. And it was basically when he was done, it was Ripple.
Yeah.
It was technically wine, but you couldn't really drink it.
It was awful. It tastes like vinegar, only sweet. Yeah.
It was not a wine for drinking. It was more a wine for sitting back and avoiding.
Right. You couldn't get drunk off it because no one could tolerate drinking that much of
Enough of it, right.
I made one. I got for Christmas one year one of those little things that make beer. It's a little tiny. It was just undrinkable. It was just tastes like soap.
Ugh. Well, folks, we're going to wrap this one up for this week, and we're sure glad that you joined us once again. We really appreciate all our listeners out there, and we hope you appreciate all the hard work and dedication that goes into each and every loving episode of VoteProPot-Cast.
What a crock.
We spend minutes every week on this.
Minutes?
No, kidding. No, it's we love doing it. It's very enjoyable. But if you enjoy the show, and I hope you do, tell a friend about us. Go on to Apple Podcasts, give us a 5-star rating, send us a message, get in touch with us. What's the best way to do that, Jay?
Send us an email. And by the way, happy holidays to everybody. We're coming right up on the magic time of the year, brand new year coming up. We got a special show we're going to put together at Andrew's bequest. He says, let's do a end of year show. So we'll be doing that in the next week or so.
Every year we always make predictions for the upcoming year. Well, I wanted to.
So we go.
We're always wrong.
We go laugh at each other.
How well our predictions, did from last year, and make some for next year.
make fun of each other's predictions from
Remember,
last year.
2019 was the year that it was going to come off Schedule
That's
1,
right.
according to my prediction.
So send us an email at podcast@votepropot.com or leave us a message on our message line. Call 240-257-2441. If you can do that this week, we can get it on next week's show for the end of the year. That'd be great. Give us some ideas. Andrew, what do you got, buddy?
You know, this past election day, we legalized in, 5 states? What I would suggest, if you live in one of those 5 states right now, is get really active in the process of writing the regulations, establishing the regulations for your state. For example, right now, I don't know if it's really set in stone, but they want to make home grow illegal in New Jersey. I don't know, has that passed yet? And do we have time to make enough noise to maybe make the politicians go, okay, well, back off?
That's a great idea.
Because this is just telling me that all these investors coming in from out of state are helping writing the laws. So get active in your states to establish fair regulations. And if you're interested in any part of the cannabis industry, we share a lot on social networking. So go to Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter and do a search for VoteProPot.